I buried my husband. I signed the death certificate. I cried for him for 2 years. But on Christmas Eve, the police knocked on my door, and the words that came out of their mouths, they simply shouldn't exist. Madam, her husband is alive. At that moment, time stopped. Grief turned into confusion. The pain turned into doubt. And hope turned into fear. What happened next doesn't seem real, but it was. An abandoned clinic. A man with the same eyes, but no memory. And such a deep mystery, which forced me to ask, who, after all, did I bury? And more, who is the man who came back to me? If you think this story is just about reunions, you are mistaken. This is a story about secrets, about swapped identities, and about the price of loving someone who may never have been who he said he was. Stay with me until the end, because the truth you're going to find out here, it can change the way you see love, death, and forgiveness. Christmas Eve arrived with a biting cold that seeped through the badly closed windows of the old dark brick house. Outside, the neighborhood glowed with colorful lights, bells hanging from balconies, and children running through the snow. But inside, everything was silence. A thick silence, the kind that you can't hear, but you can feel in your chest. It was the third Christmas without him. The third Christmas since the burial, since that procession covered in tears and a coffin too heavy to carry with his arms alone. The woman, sitting on the sofa wrapped in a navy wool blanket, stared at the reflection of the distant lights in the window. The smell of dry pine in the corner of the room mixed with that of old wood, forming a kind of melancholic perfume, a portrait of time that stood still. She used to say that Christmas was the most magical time of the year. He still remembers the exact words he used. That is the only night when even angels walk among us. But since his departure, everything that was glitter has become a shadow. The hallways of the house, once alive with laughter, hurried steps, and the sound of the old record player playing Bing Crosby, now looked more like the halls of an abandoned museum, where every corner holds a frozen memory. In place of the decorated tree, an empty bookcase. In the center of the table, where there was once wine and bread, now only rested a picture frame with a photo of the two, smiling, frozen in a time when it was still hot. That night, she walked through the house as if revisiting a war field. Each room revealed scars. The room still had his coat hanging behind the door. The toothbrush next to hers, as if at some point he could come back. She never had the courage to keep her belongings, not out of attachment, but out of respect for what they built. It was as if, somehow, it kept alive the absurd possibility that it had all been a deception, a delirium provoked by pain. She knew it wasn't, of course. He was there at the funeral. He felt the weight of the earth fall. He signed the certificate. He cried for months on end. But time does not heal, it only silences. And silence, she knew, was treacherous. He disguises himself as peace, but it is only absence. That night, the silence seemed denser. She tried not to get lost in her thoughts, but it was inevitable. The flashes came like lightning, short and painful. He held her hand last Christmas together, laughing at a joke that only the two of them understood. The smell of his perfume as he approached. The way he adjusted his tie in the mirror before supper. Every detail now loomed like stabs in the void he left. The absence was a ghost that roamed freely through the house. Outside, the laughter of the neighbors contrasted with the inner melancholy. She wondered how it was possible that the world kept turning when hers had stopped. This was an invisible pain. No one sees the grief in a widow's eyes after the first year. People expect you to have overcome it. That is ready to go. But how to go on when half of your story has been buried with someone? She took a deep breath and lit a candle over the fireplace. A symbolic, almost ritualistic gesture. The flame flickered as if dancing to a forgotten song. "Merry Christmas," she murmured under her breath, just to herself, or perhaps to him wherever she was. Deep down, there was a restlessness. It wasn't just sadness, it was something more. A feeling that something wasn't right. From the first Christmas without him, she felt that a piece of the puzzle was missing. I had recurring dreams about him, but not those full of longing and peace. They were strange, disconnected, as if he were trying to say something. One night, she dreamed that he was knocking on the door, wet with snow, saying that he needed to warn her of something urgent. She woke up scared. He threw away that dream like someone who throws away a letter without opening. But he persisted. Even trying to rationalize, there was something about that night that felt different. It was as if the air was heavier, as if the shadows in the corners of the house were lurking. The fireplace, which had previously warmed up, now seemed only to illuminate the loneliness. And then, for a second, she had the sensation of hearing footsteps coming from outside. He thought it was his imagination, but the shiver on the back of his neck said otherwise. She stood up slowly, trying to control her breathing. He approached the window, peeped through the curtains, but saw nothing. Just the snow falling slowly, covering the streets like a white blanket of silence. He sat down again, trying to convince himself that it was just fatigue. But the feeling persisted, like a dull beat in the chest. Maybe it was just the nostalgia wanting to become a presence. Perhaps it was the heart wanting to transform the impossible into hope. But maybe, just maybe, something was really about to happen. And then, suddenly, he heard the sound. A snap. And soon after, a touch. A gentle touch on the front door. Midnight came like an icy sigh from the depths of winter. The old clock in the living room announced the time with its hoarse bells, each chime reverberating as a painful reminder that another Christmas had passed without him. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks in the window, whistling forgotten songs, as if the heavens themselves were trying to say something. She curled up on the couch, pulling the blanket up to her neck, her eyes fixed on the faint flame of the candle. Over the fireplace, everything seemed motionless, frozen in time. It was then that the unexpected sound broke the silence, a dry, firm touch on the door. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. The wind, perhaps. A loose branch beating. But it came again. Stronger. 3 rhythmic beats. His heart leaped in his chest, as if recognizing something that reason could not yet explain. He stood up slowly, each step on the wooden floor sounding louder than the last. He approached the door cautiously, not knowing what to expect. It was too late for visits, especially on a night like that. The world was asleep, but there, in that house of mourning, something had awakened. When he turned the handle, the cold invaded the environment like a ghost. In front of her, 2 men. Cops. They wore the dark uniforms typical of the county and had the austere expression of someone who is used to giving bad news. One of them, older, took off his cap as a sign of respect. The other held a clipboard, but his eyes did not leave the woman's face. She didn't say anything. She just looked at them, her heart pounding, her stomach contracting as if something inside her already knew. Finally, the eldest spoke. His voice was deep, paused. "Madam, we need you to come with us. There is something you need to see." No explanation, no detail, just that veiled invitation to the unknown. The world seemed to stop for a second. The words danced in the air before they reached their meaning. She blinked, trying to understand. Instinct told you to refuse. But something deep down pulled towards yes. She searched for some clue on their faces. Sadness? Urgency? Pity? But what he saw was trained neutrality, the kind of expression one learns when dealing with tragedy every day. He took his overcoat from the hanger next to the door, put on his shoes with trembling hands, and, without saying a word, followed them. Outside, The snow was falling slowly, as if even time was hesitant. The patrol car was parked just ahead, its low beams illuminating the ice-covered road. When she got into the back seat, the smell of leather and police radio brought back old memories, from the time she watched police movies with her husband on the couch. She felt out of place, as if she were living a scene written by someone else. The engine was started, and the sleeping city began to pass through the windows. The Christmas lights twinkled in houses full of life, contrasting with the lump in his throat. Why was she there? What had they found? And why, of all people, had they knocked at his door? No one said anything during the journey. Just the sound of the windshield wiper cutting through the silence, and the distant voices of the radio communicating some occurrence on the other side of the city. She wanted to ask, but something stopped her. It was as if words were caught between the fear of knowing and the impossible desire for hope. His gaze was fixed on the snow that was piling up on the side of the street. The memory betrayed her, bringing back the image of her husband driving under that same snow, smiling at her, softly singing an old Christmas song. That memory hurt more than any truth. Inside it, a whirlwind. Part of him believed that perhaps it was some mistake, or worse, some tragedy involving someone close to him. But there was another part, silent and almost childish, that dared to desire something that she herself had buried. It was absurd, irrational. But when you lose someone you love deeply, the mind creates secret paths to survive. And she, even without knowing it, had kept a crack open. A crack through which an uncomfortable light now entered, a doubt, a question that grew like an avalanche. Is it possible? The trip lasted no more than 20 minutes, but for her it seemed like an eternity suspended between the real and the impossible. When the patrol car finally stopped in front of an old, partially lit building, she felt her legs weaken. The officers got out first, opened the door for her with a subtle gesture, and led her down the ice-covered sidewalk. That was where the answers lived, or perhaps where the nightmare would take on a new form. But nothing would prepare her for what would come next. The police car slid slowly down the snow-covered road, and the sound of tires on the wet asphalt seemed to follow the hurried rhythm of her heart. The city slept, shrouded in the icy silence of the Christmas dawn. The lights flickered in the windows of the houses, but she didn't see them. She was immersed in a whirlwind of thoughts that seemed to run over each other inside her mind. The back seat of the car was uncomfortable, cold, and that metallic smell mixed with leather and old radio made her feel out of place, as if she had been torn from her own world and thrown into a nightmare. None of the officers said a word. They just exchanged serious looks, the kind that carry too many secrets to be said. She tried to speak, but her voice did not come out. His hands trembled on his lap, his whole body tense. The noise of the windshield wipers scratching the glass sounded like a metronome of anxiety. Outside, the streets were deserted. The shuttered shops, the lighted trees. It was all a distant portrait of ordinary life that now seemed unattainable. When the car turned around the corner of an old building, she felt her stomach turn. The place was strange, decadent, almost sinister. A building of bricks darkened by time, tall windows and rusty railings. The sign on the facade read Rockfield District Precinct, though the paint was peeling off, erasing half of the lettering. It was as if the place had been forgotten by the world. The older officer opened the car door and helped her down. The cold of dawn cut his face like thin blades. As he passed through the iron gate, he heard the mournful creaking of the hinges, as if even the building was lamenting. Inside, the atmosphere was austere and silent. The walls were covered with dark wood panels. The worn marble floor reflected the yellowish lights of the ceiling. The smell of aged paper and cold brew coffee hung in the air. A fan spun lazily in the corner, emitting a monotonous hum. She was led to a small room with a metal table, 2 plastic chairs, and a file crammed with papers. The sound of the door closing behind her echoed like the end of one cycle, or perhaps the beginning of another. The younger officer stood next to the table, while the older sat down and opened a dark leather briefcase. Inside it were papers, reports, and what appeared to be a dossier. He didn't say anything right away. He looked at her with a look that mixed respect and compassion, and then began to speak in a low, controlled voice. "Mrs. Whitmore, we found something that we need to confirm with you." She frowned, still confused. Her husband, Mr. Alexander Whitmore, his name came up in an investigation we conducted earlier today. The phrase seemed simple, but the impact was devastating. It was like hearing the name of a dead man spoken for the first time in years. The sound was familiar and impossible at the same time. "That must be a mistake," she replied in a thin voice. The officer took a deep breath and continued. "We were called to verify a complaint in an old disused psychiatric clinic on the outskirts of the city. Arriving there, we found a disoriented man in a state of mental confusion, apparently living among the wreckage. He refused to say his own name, but repeated a single sentence. 'She'll come back for me. It's Christmas.' Her blood ran cold. That phrase, said like this, with such precision, sounded like a distant echo of something that only the two of them shared. We checked the fingerprints," the officer continued, "and the result was unquestionable. They belonged to her husband, Mrs. Whitmore." The world seemed to collapse in slow motion. The words floated in the air, and her body reacted before her mind understood. Her eyes widened, her breathing quickened, and a vertigo forced her to lean on the table. "That's not possible," he murmured. "I buried him. I saw the coffin being closed." The policeman exchanged a quick glance with his colleague and responded with the rehearsed calm of someone who has already dealt with the absurdity. "We know, ma'am, but the records we have indicate that the death certificate was falsified. The buried body does not correspond to the identity of her husband." He pushed the briefcase towards her. Inside, a black and white photo showed a thin, blank-looking man sitting on an iron bed, wearing patient clothes. And even with her face downcast, she recognized it. The eyes were the same. That image pierced her like a blade. It was him, or something that was left of him. "He's alive," the officer said. The words, so direct, seemed blasphemous. She put her hand to her mouth, trying to contain the crying that rose uncontrollably. The tears fell, hot, mingling with the cold that came from within. Everything she knew, everything she believed in for 2 years, crumbled before a photograph. It was as if the universe had decided to play with human pain. "Where is he now?" he asked, almost voiceless. "In the same clinic. We are ensuring security at the site until tomorrow morning. You'd better go with daylight, ma'am. There are parts of the building that have collapsed. It's dangerous." She nodded, not really listening. The mind was elsewhere, trying to stitch together the impossible. She remembered every detail of the day she lost him. The phone call from the hospital. The doctor's cold voice saying that he didn't resist. The ceremony, the closed coffin, the damp touch of the earth on the coffin. The certificate signed by a man she now discovered to be a legal ghost. It was as if time itself had been manipulated. She began to wonder, who was in that coffin? Why didn't anyone notice? And above all, why would anyone fake a death? The questions came like a storm, each one more painful than the last. The older officer said, "Mrs. Whitmore, we know that's a lot of information, but we need you with us tomorrow. He asked for you." He repeated his name several times. That phrase, "he asked for you," penetrated like a ray of emotion. Part of her wanted to run to the clinic right away. Another part feared that it was a trick, a trap of fate. What if it wasn't for him? What if it was just a cruel coincidence, a similar man, a false hope about to be destroyed? But something deep down, an invisible thread, said it was real. The same thread that made her keep his coat hanging behind the door, the brush next to hers, the portrait on the table. As if a part of her knew, always knew, that the story was not yet over. "I will," he said finally, his voice trembling but firm. "I want to see him." The policeman nodded, collected the documents, and said he would send for her at dawn. When she left the police station, the snow fell in slow, perfect flakes, covering the ground like a silent cloak. The air felt different, heavy and lively at the same time. The world outside followed the normal course of Christmas Eve, but inside something had awakened. The old pain was beginning to dissolve into a confusion of fear and hope. She knew the truth was near, but she also knew that truths like that never come alone. They always bring shadows with them. And as he walked to the car that would take her back home, an unsettling feeling grew inside him. Something told him that when the sun came up, nothing would be the same again. Dawn arrived covered by a thick mist that engulfed the sky and hid the contours of the world. The sun could barely pierce the grayish mantle that covered the city, and the first rays of light only accentuated the coldness of the landscape. She woke up not knowing if she had really slept. Her eyes were heavy as if they had gone through entire nights, but her mind remained alert, restless, stuck in the same spot as the night before. He is alive. He dressed in silence. She chose the thickest coat, put on the boots he had given her last Christmas together, as if, somehow, that detail could protect her from what was to come. When the car arrived to pick her up, the world seemed suspended between yesterday and what she wasn't ready to discover. During the journey, the police avoided conversations. She thanked him for that. All he needed at that moment was to listen to the sound of his own breathing and try to organize the chaos that was accumulating inside him. As they approached the place, she saw the silhouette of the psychiatric clinic form in the middle of the fog. It was an imposing building, made of dark stone, with rusty railings and broken windows. It had the appearance of something that had been hastily abandoned, or perhaps left behind on purpose. The iron gate opened with a creak that chilled to the bone. The courtyard was covered with dry leaves and stomped snow. The silence there seemed to have a voice of its own, and the cold was more intense, as if that place rejected human warmth. Upon entering, she was taken by a feeling of heaviness. It wasn't just the dampness on the walls, the musty smell, or the dimly lit hallways. It was something deeper, as if the walls held old screams, memories of forgotten people, broken stories. The footsteps echoed on the stone floor, and each half-open door revealed empty rooms, iron beds, broken furniture, medical records scattered as if time had stopped at the exact moment of abandonment. She wondered how anyone could have survived there for so long. How he, if it was him, had resisted the collapse of his mind, or had been swallowed up by it. An elderly nurse approached, walking with difficulty, leaning on a wooden cane. Her eyes, sunken and tired, stared at her as if they recognized a part of the past. "Are you his wife?" she asked in a trembling voice. She nodded, unable to utter a word. The man sighed, as if carrying a secret for too long. "He has been here since the day they brought that body to bury. It never left. Sometimes he called his name at night. Sometimes he was silent for days. I never said who it was, but the eyes don't lie." She felt her stomach sink. The nurse pointed to a corridor to the left, where the light was even dimmer, and said, "He's in the last room." The corridor seemed endless. The lights flashed. The walls, once white, were yellowed by time. There were marks on the floor, as if something had been dragged there frequently. The air was heavy. And then, suddenly, a voice. Weak, shaky, almost a whisper. "Elizabeth." She stopped. The heart raced as if it had been ripped from the chest. He would recognize that voice anywhere in the world, even after 1,000 years. It was him. It couldn't be anyone else. He walked slowly, approaching the half-open door at the end of the corridor. He pushed carefully, and there he was, sitting on the bed, thin, with gray hair and his gaze lost somewhere on the ceiling. He turned his face slowly, as if moved by something sacred. When he saw her, his eyes widened for a moment, then softened, but they didn't recognize her. "You've come," he said, his voice breaking. "I knew it would come at Christmas." She fell to her knees, tears flowing uncontrollably. It was him, but at the same time, it wasn't. The face was the same, only older. The traces were there, but the soul seemed fractured. He held out his hand to her, hesitantly. When she touched it, she felt a shiver run through her body. It was like touching a ghost that decided to come back. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. He frowned, confused. "Of course. You are the dream girl, the one who always smiles. I see you whenever it snows." She felt her heart break. He didn't remember. Or maybe he remembered only a version of her that his mind created. She sat next to him, held his cold hands, and tried to contain her despair. The questions piled up. What did they do with him? What happened in those 2 years? And, above all, who was buried in his place? She looked at the police officers waiting at the door. One of them nodded as if to say, "Let's start the investigation." As he spoke disconnected things, fragmented memories of an accident, of a car on fire, of someone saying, "You need to get away," she realized that there was more than one return. There was a hidden history, a buried truth, a conspiracy. His mind was damaged, but something still held up. And she knew, if she followed this thread to the end, she would find something that would change everything. That reunion was not the end of the pain. It was just the beginning of a new labyrinth of shadows. Morning light timidly poured in through the clinic's broken window, creating thin beams that pierced the dust particles in the air. The room where he was simple. An iron bed, a flat mattress, a threadbare blanket, and a chair leaning against the corner. The walls, peeling, seemed to echo time. But none of that mattered. For her, that space forgotten by the world had become the stage of an unlikely miracle. Sitting next to him, her hands trembling in his, she tried to hold back the tears that pooled in her eyes. It was like touching a fragment of the past, and yet he was there, alive, breathing, looking at her as if he knew her only from the inside. He blinked slowly, watching every feature of her face, as if searching for something his mind couldn't reach. There was a strange sweetness in his gaze, a mixture of admiration and confusion. "You have the eyes of the woman of my dreams," he said, his voice weak but firm. That sentence cut through her chest like a razor. It was him, but not completely. It was as if part of it was frozen in time, trapped in a place where trauma had closed the doors of memory. She smiled through tears, even though her heart was in tatters. "It's me, Alex. Elizabeth. I came. You called me, and I came." He frowned. "Elizabeth." He repeated, as if the word had flavor. He looked around, then at his own hands, as if trying to confirm his existence. "We are in 2019. She closed her eyes for a moment. The world collapsed again. He believed it was still the last Christmas before the alleged accident. 2 years had passed, but for him, it was as if he had woken up the next day. Time inside him had stopped. She tried to explain carefully, with the delicacy of someone who deals with a cracked crystal. "It's already 2021, Alex. You were presumed dead. I went to his funeral. I cried for you. For 2 years." He was silent. The expression has changed. His pupils dilated as if something inside him ruptured. His breathing accelerated. "Dead. I remember fire. Of someone screaming. Someone telling me to run. After darkness." The police officers looked at each other at the door. She looked to them for answers, But what she received was the tense look of someone who knows that the truth is about to explode. "We did a first analysis," said one of them, approaching with a clipboard. According to clinic records, he was admitted under a false name in late 2019, days after the accident that allegedly took his life. But there is something more. Elizabeth stood up, without letting go of her husband's hand. "What?" The policeman hesitated. The death certificate was issued based on a charred body found inside a car. The car was his. The documents were there. But now we know, the body was not. She put her hand to her mouth, swallowing the scream. So who? Who was buried? Silence answered for them. Her husband looked at her, now with more awareness. The pieces seemed to move in his mind. Someone got me out of that car. I remember, hands, of a voice saying, "You need to disappear. Now." He closed his eyes. "I thought I was saving you." Elizabeth fell into a sitting seat. His mind was spinning. What did he mean by saving you? She looked at the policeman. "You're going to investigate, right? Are you going to find out who did it?" The eldest nodded. "We have already started, but the road is long. There are forged documents, changed names, and from the looks of it, unresolved business." She turned her eyes to the man in front of her. Was he still her husband? Or just the reflection of what he had been? Even with the time, the distance, the madness, the face was the same. And the eyes. Her eyes still carried that sparkle that one day made her fall in love. But something was broken. He held her hand tighter. "Forgive me for having disappeared. I thought I was protecting you. Someone told me that if I died, you would live." Elizabeth hugged him. A tight hug, full of despair, love and fury. It was as if he were trying to merge the broken pieces, to unite the past with the present in an attempt to reconquer what time stole. Tears flowed down both of them. It was the reunion of two worlds, one that survived the pain, and the other that was shaped by it. But in the middle of that embrace, a question kept echoing like a distant bell. Who was buried in his place? And why? The days following the reunion brought no relief. On the contrary, they opened even deeper wounds. Elizabeth was home again, but the silence was different now. It was no longer the absence of someone dead. It was the disconcerting presence of a past that refused to fit in. Her husband was alive, but nothing made sense. He recovered slowly in an isolated, guarded medical ward, and even with the help of specialists, his memory fragments came and went like wind-blown leaves. Sometimes he said he worked with investments, other times he talked about debts, dangerous men, loose words. But a pattern began to emerge, and she knew there was more to this story than just a disappearance. Elizabeth began to look for clues. She went back to the old papers, called people she hadn't heard in years, rummaged through boxes that were stored in the basement. Most of them with memories of a time when she believed she knew the man she had married. It was while digging through Alex's workbooks that he found a name that was discreetly repeated: Donovan Gray. A business friend, according to notes on business cards. She had never met him. In one of the drawers, he also found an unidentified key attached to a small handwritten card, in case of emergency. The phone number on the back was no longer active, and that made her tremble. Why would her husband have hidden it from her? On an impulse, she reached out to one of Alex's old colleagues, an insurance broker named Howard, who was still working downtown. After a few unsuccessful attempts, he agreed to meet her in a discreet cafe, and he seemed visibly uncomfortable. When she asked about Donovan, his expression changed. "I don't know much, but..." Alex was involved with a strange group, some off-the-record business. Security, data protection, life insurance with weird clauses. And there were people who didn't like to lose money on him. Elizabeth felt a chill rise down her spine. Howard hesitated before saying, "There was one night, weeks before the accident. He told me, if I disappear, tell Elizabeth it was better this way." That hit like a punch. Elizabeth left the cafe with wobbly legs. If that was true, then her husband knew something bad was about to happen. And, worse, he planned to disappear. Or was forced to. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to move, but none yet fit together clearly. When confronting him at the hospital, he showed Donovan's photo. He was slow to react, but after minutes of silence, he muttered, "He deceived me. He said it was the only way." Elizabeth insisted. "What way?" "Flee. Fake your death." He didn't answer, just curled up in bed, his eyes empty. His silence said 1,000 words. There was guilt there. The police were also investigating. They discovered that Alex's death certificate had been signed by a doctor named Conrad Blake, who had now been listed as missing since a few days after the burial. According to records, he had made appointments for companies linked to Donovan. None of this was a coincidence. A trail of false documents, mistaken identities, and businesses registered in tax havens began to emerge. Alex wasn't a criminal, but he was in the middle of something much bigger than himself. And perhaps by the time he realized, it was too late to come clean. The truth was beginning to take on darker contours. But there was something even more disturbing. Elizabeth began to suspect that the body buried in her husband's place had not been a mistake, but rather part of a plan. An exchange. A sacrifice. The autopsy was never complete, and the partial cremation of the body made identification difficult. When she questioned the detective in charge, she heard the phrase she feared the most: "There is a real chance that that body was placed there on purpose, to simulate his death." And yes, someone helped him. She felt her stomach sink. Someone designed it with precision. And her husband, even though he had no memory, was part of the plan. The moral dilemma imposed itself with brutality. How can you trust someone who hid everything? Who pretended to be dead? That involved dangerous people and threw his own family into mourning? But, at the same time, how can you hate someone who was also a victim? Someone who, deep down, maybe just wanted to protect her? It was a fine line. Love still existed, but now it was tainted with doubts. And she found herself trying to love a man she no longer recognized. But one thing was certain: there was more to come. The memories of him were slowly coming back. And with them, truths would emerge that perhaps she was not prepared to face. The house had never looked so strange. Every piece of furniture, every portrait, every little everyday object now felt like part of a setup to test Elizabeth's nerves. It was as if the home where she spent so many years with her husband had been transformed into a play with swapped actors. Alex walked slowly through the rooms, as if he were discovering everything for the first time. The carpet in the living room, where one day the two of them sat to set up the Christmas tree together, now caused only a slight frown. The bookshelf with books, all arranged in alphabetical order by himself, no longer awakened any memory. There was something disconnected between him and the house, as if his soul was still trying to keep up with the body back. During the day, he seemed quiet, though distant. He asked simple questions, such as where the cutlery was, why there were so many coats hanging, or why there was no more piano in the living room. Sometimes he would be silent for hours, just watching the movement of the trees through the window. But at night, something changed. Intense nightmares made him wake up sweating, panting, with his eyes wide and his body shaking. Elizabeth listened from the other room to the muffled screams and meaningless murmurs, names she didn't know, places he'd never mentioned, and always, invariably, the same word at the end: fire. That repeated itself like a prophecy. As if, even without remembering the facts, his body still remembered the trauma. She began to keep a diary, writing down everything he said. an almost desperate gesture from someone trying to put together a puzzle with broken pieces. He wrote down the name Donovan repeated in a dream. He wrote down the description of a dark alley, a red-haired woman, a phone that rang and then exploded. Nothing made sense, but there were patterns. And one day, as they sat in the kitchen, he held a cup of tea with both hands and said, as if remembering an irrelevant detail, "You wore a blue dress that Christmas, with white lace up their sleeves." Elizabeth froze. That was true. She remembered. That dress she wore in 2019, the last Christmas before the accident. He hadn't forgotten everything. It was coming back, little by little, on a tangent of pain. It was on that night that she decided. He could no longer live on fragments. He needed the truth, all of it, even if it hurt, even if it destroyed everything that was left between them. After dinner, while he read an old magazine on the couch, she sat down across from him and was silent for a few minutes. He just observed it. The way he held the paper, the way he moved his right foot when he got anxious. It was still Alex, but there was also something strange, dark, hidden in the back of his eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm. "Did you fake your death, Alex?" He stared at her for long seconds. Time seemed to have stopped. The clock in the living room was ticking painfully loudly. I don't know," he replied, lowering his gaze. "Part of me says yes, that I left everything, that I hid. But another part, he only sees the fire." Elizabeth leaned forward. "You left me burying a stranger, Alex. You left me living 2 years of mourning for a lie. Do you understand what that means?" He nodded slowly. His eyes began to fill with tears. "I thought I was protecting you." The phrase fell into the air like a blade. "Whose own?" she shouted. "Of what?" He closed his eyes. "From me. Of what I was becoming. Of the men who were behind me. Of the mistakes I made." The words came out as a bitter outburst from someone who held the pain too long. The tension grew like a rope about to break. Elizabeth stood up. "You could have told me. I would have stayed. I would have faced it with you. But you killed me in life, Alex. You destroyed everything we built." He began to cry. A silent, heavy cry. "If I had told you, you would have been in danger. They knew everything. From our home, of his name, of your work. I've become a risk to you. And someone told me that if I died, you would live." She approached. "Who, Alex?" He just shook his head. "I don't remember." It was a voice, a man, or maybe more than one. "I was promised a new identity, peace, and I accepted." The silence that came after was deafening. She sat on the floor, her eyes red, her chest heaving. There was no right answer. There was no justice that could solve it. They were both caught in a web of bad decisions, secrets, and torn love. "Do you remember anything before the accident?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "A car, someone running, one package, a scream, and then fire. Lots of fire." He closed his eyes. "And somebody saying, 'Now you're free.'" Elizabeth felt a shiver run down her spine. There was much more behind it all than he could remember. And maybe someone was still wanting to keep those memories buried. Hours later, already lying down, she received a call from an unknown number. He answered in a low voice. On the other side, a deep, cold male voice. "You're approaching something dangerous, Mrs. Whitmore. Stop before it's too late. Not everyone comes back from the truth." Before she could answer, the line dropped. She stood there, phone in hand, heart racing and an uncomfortable certainty. The real confrontation was still just beginning. And to overcome it, he would need to face not only the ghosts of the past, but the living who still try to keep everything hidden. That night was the longest Elizabeth had ever faced. The silence of the house seemed amplified, as if each wall was holding its breath. Since the anonymous call, she could no longer rest. The whispered threat still reverberated in the ears. Not everyone comes back from the truth. It wasn't just any metaphor, it was a warning. A warning that the path she had chosen to follow would have consequences. Still, she knew she couldn't stop. I had already lost too much, cried too much, and buried enough hope for a lifetime. Now he needed to know, not for revenge, but for peace. For the first time in 2 years, peace was not in resignation. It was in fact. The next day, he went to the police station to talk to the detective in charge. There was urgency in his eyes. He said the experts confirmed it. The body buried in Alex's place was that of a man named Martin Hale, a known accomplice of Donovan Gray in long-standing investigations of corporate fraud. Martin was a ghost accountant, missing since 2018, involved with embezzlement, false identities, and from what it seems, I knew too much. Elizabeth felt a chill. So he was the one who died in my husband's place? The detective nodded. Yes, but the strangest thing is that Martin was, much like Alex, enough to deceive, with the body partially charred. The puzzle became a tortuous image. Alex had not only been forced to disappear, he had been replaced. The staging of the accident was not random. It was set up, planned. Someone chose to put Martin's body in the car, falsify the documents, issue a certificate, and bury the mistake. But why Alex? Why pretend he died? The questions kept coming up like waves, and one clue began to stand out. Elizabeth's name was also on forged documents, but they were never used. The detective revealed that there was a plan B. If Alex didn't disappear, she would be involved. And then everything became clearer. When she returned home, her hands trembling and her soul burning, she decided to confront him. He was on the porch, looking at the sky. He seemed more lucid, more present, as if the reunion, the house, the time together were rebuilding part of the mind that once seemed broken. When she told him what he had discovered, he closed his eyes for a long moment and then said, "Martin was my friend. He was the one who saved me. He took me out of the car. He took me to Donovan. And when he understood that I would be hunted, he volunteered." Elizabeth couldn't believe it. "Are you telling me he killed himself instead?" Alex nodded, teary-eyed. "It wasn't suicide. It was loyalty and sacrifice. And to this day, I carry the weight of that." The silence that followed was dense. Elizabeth looked at him as if she saw a stranger and an old love at the same time. "Why didn't you tell me all this before?" He replied in a broken voice, "Because I didn't know who I was until I saw you again. I was lost, extinct. I thought I could live like this, hidden. But there is no hiding place for those who carry such a big lie." His words tore her inside. There was still love, but there was also pain, confusion, and now an open wound named Martin. She cried for 2 men at the same time. One who pretended to die, and another who actually died to protect them. That same night, while trying to sleep, he heard a noise in the backyard. He went to the window and saw blue lights flashing. 2 police cars. One of them ran up the stairs and knocked on the door. It was the detective. "He decided to turn himself in," she said, panting. "He said he wanted to tell everything, that he needed to clear Martin's name, that it was ready." Elizabeth did not answer. He just nodded silently. When Alex left the house escorted, she didn't cry. For the first time, I felt something different. A pain that seemed dignified. A weight that came not from the loss, but from the end of the lie. He was no longer the man she had known. But he wasn't a monster either. It was someone trying, finally, to do the right thing. In the car, before leaving, he looked at her and whispered out the window, "I don't know what the future will bring. But now, you know everything." She shook her head. "No, Alex. Now I feel everything." The car drove off, taking with it the man she loved, lost, found again, and now, perhaps, needed to let go again. But there was a difference now. She was no longer in the dark. The truth was there, whole, hurting, but alive. And even if love didn't survive all that, she would survive. Christmas has arrived again. But this time, the house was different. Not for what it contained, but for what it no longer needed to carry. The shadows were still there, the dark corners of the hallway, the memories trapped in the frames of the portraits, the empty spaces at the table. But for the first time in 2 years, Elizabeth felt that silence was no longer a prison. It was a new beginning, a blank cloth that did carry marks of the past, but no longer his weight. He walked around the room with calm steps, the sound of the floor creaking under his feet as if greeting the return of someone whole. In the fireplace, a soft fire danced, warming not only the body but also the soul. She had decorated the house with simplicity, a discreet arrangement on the table, a small Christmas tree, much smaller than the one she set up with Alex in the early years of their marriage. The lights flickered slowly, as if following the new rhythm of his heart. Above the fireplace, a picture frame with his image. The same smile as before, but now seen with different eyes. It was no longer the memory of a dead man. It was the portrait of a man who tried to love, tried to escape, tried to protect, and who, in the end, tried to fix. And that, she had decided, was enough to begin to forgive. Next to the photo, a lit white candle. A simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. It was not a tribute to mourning, it was a sign of peace. As if to say, "Now you are at peace." And so did I. The sound of the radio played an instrumental version of Silent Night. She closed her eyes for a moment and allowed herself to smile. A shy but real smile. It was the first time in a long time that she felt her face light. Forgiveness had not come suddenly. It had been a bumpy road, full of stops, anger, and unanswered questions. But in the end, I had understood. Some people do not make mistakes out of malice. They make mistakes trying to survive. He looked out the window. The snow fell slowly, covering the world with a silent layer of renewal. Children ran down the street, parents carried bags, couples shared umbrellas. The world went on. Life did not wait. And now, finally, she was ready to follow her too. I didn't know what would come next. He didn't know if Alex would be convicted, or if his story would move justice. But that didn't matter anymore. The reunion had brought her what she needed most. True. And even if love didn't return to the way it was, she had rediscovered something even more essential: herself. He went upstairs to the bedroom. He sat down at the desk where he kept his notebooks, his old letters, his diaries. He took a blank sheet, took a deep breath and wrote on top, "Christmas, Year of Truth." And he began to write. Not a letter to him, but to herself. A promise that he would never leave questions unanswered again. That he would never live in silence again for fear of hurting. And that, from then on, there would be no more room for ghosts, only for new, firm roots, planted in honesty. He closed the notebook and went down again. She sat on the couch, pulled out the blanket, held a cup of hot tea in her hands. And when the distant church bell rang, announcing midnight, she closed her eyes and murmured, "Thank you." He didn't know whom exactly. Maybe God, maybe Martin, maybe Alex himself. But she felt that something inside her had finally found a place. For the first time, I wasn't expecting him to knock on the door. Not even waiting for a letter, a call, an explanation. For the first time, he was just living. And this was a gift that no lie could ever steal. Some ghosts don't come back to haunt us, but to set us free. There are stories that seem to end when the pain reaches its peak. But the truth is that some pain, they are just the beginning of a new path. For a long time, I believed that grief was the end of everything. That after death, there was only silence. That after his absence, there was only emptiness. But today I understand. Pain does not appear to destroy. She shows up to reveal. My husband's death was not the end. It was the beginning of a long journey, made up of lies, of fragmented memories, of confrontations with what is most difficult to accept. The truth that has always been before me, but that I never wanted to see. He was not the perfect man, nor the hero I imagined, but he wasn't a villain either. He was human, fragile, confused, and yet, he tried to protect me in the only way he knew how. It was necessary to look deep into the eyes of a man who loved me and deceived me, to understand that the truth is not black and white. She lives in the space between pain and redemption, among what we remember and what we choose to forget. Today, I no longer carry the weight of absence, nor the anger of the lie. Today, I carry scars. But scars are marks of those who survived. And maybe this is the true miracle of Christmas. Not the return of those who left, but the return of those who stayed. The woman I am now is not the same one who buried dreams 2 years ago. She is stronger, more lucid, more whole, because now I know that forgiveness is not for those who deserve it. It's for those who need to continue. What about you? Have you ever stopped to think about what you're holding inside you? What truth have you not yet had the courage to look it in the face? What if the person you love, not who you think, would you have the courage to listen to the truth? Or would you rather continue to embrace a comfortable lie? Comment below, which part of this story touched you the most? If this made you reflect, subscribes to the channel, activates the bell, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Because here, we don't tell stories to entertain. We tell stories to heal.